Welcome to another Checkbox webinar. My name is Min. It's very nice to see you all, and welcome to our webinar based on in-house legal transformation with the topic from in-house legal to leaders in transformation within weeks, learning how legal automation has helped Telstra deliver winning outcomes for the business. As I mentioned, my name is Min. I am one of the customer success leads here at Checkbox. And what that means is I get to lead and advise innovation teams on how to drive automation. And I've done that across the enterprise and with governments globally. And our guest today, really the star of the show, as you can see, is Henry Lin. So over to you, Henry. If you could give a short introduction, a brief introduction to everyone who has joined us on call. And yeah, if you could just share who you are, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Amin. So my name is Henry. I'm in the innovative service delivery team over at Telstra, and we're responsible for spotting and implementing process improvements for the legal, regulatory, sustainability, government relations, and the external affairs team. I'm also part of the Legal Technology and Innovation Special Interest Group as part of the Association of Corporate Counsel. It's lovely to be here.
Awesome. And some of you guys will know Henry from the ACC, who are great friends of ours. So if you're from there, welcome, and it's good to see you. Now, a few housekeeping rules before we do get started. You'll notice that there's a Q&A section in the box. If I'm just pointing to it, I think it's here or maybe up here, where you can post your questions over the duration of this webinar. Please post them through. We'll try to get through your questions towards the end. So we're shooting for about 30 minutes of content. And then because this is a special episode, we've got about 15 minutes with Henry to set aside questions and answers. If we don't get around to answering your question, rest assured we will get around to answering them with the follow-up email. This webinar is recorded, so you'll get a link to rewatch it or to share it, as well as the list of questions that were asked, both answered and unanswered, of course, with all the answers provided as part of that. And you can always find both myself and Henry's details in the sort of slide that's going to come towards the end, where we'll also share what the next webinar topic is. Cool. Now, with that said, I'm going to stop sharing because now it's over to the cool stuff, which is talking about legal automation and how Telstra has gone about doing that. And really today's conversation, Henry, I'd love to kind of focus on the whys and the hows. But before we do that, I think what would be great for the audience to know is a bit of your context. So tell us a little bit about who Telstra is. Perhaps we have some members from the international audience. And in particular, given that you're in the legal automation space, how many lawyers do you guys have? How big is your legal team? And how many people do you have supporting that legal team? Paint the picture for us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Min. So Telstra is Australia's largest telecommunications provider. And my team, which is the innovative service delivery team, we're a team of 4. Assisting the business unit, which includes the legal team, the regulatory affairs team, the government relations team, and the sustainability team of about 300 people in that client business unit. And as part of those 300, we also have about 120 of which are lawyers. And we do focus the majority of our process simplification and improvements on the legal team.
Fantastic. Thanks for setting the scene for us in terms of the people side. But can you share a bit about the catalyst of transformation, right? So why was automation such a big deal for you guys? Why was it needed?
Absolutely. So as part of the T22 Telstra strategy, which is business-wide, there was an amalgamation of the legal team, which previously sat separately, but has now been a part of this big business unit, which we call SEAL, including all of the other non-legal functions that I've just mentioned. And as part of that process, in order to be able to respond effectively, with high quality, but also with efficiency to the volume of work that's coming in, there was a high demand for process improvement, simplification, and legal automation.
Awesome. And I think that really has been the theme of legal service transformation, legal automation in the past few years, right? It's they're doing more with less, but really keeping up fundamentally with the volume of requests coming in from the business, and then finding ways to better improve that. So I'm super glad to hear that was sort of the impetus and the reason why you guys went on that journey. Now, I'm pretty sure that the question that people are asking, and I'm sure there are many in the audience today, and if this is one of you, please feel free to ask questions as well. is how do you get started with the automation journey, right? And in particular, maybe we'll start with, what does automation look like on a week-to-week basis for you? How do you get started? What does that journey look like? What does your team do? Paint the picture for us.
Absolutely. So we like to look at the entire process of ideation and receiving the ideas all the way to the end of continuously improving the deliverable. And we like to split that into half. And where it splits is what we call the minimal viable product, the MVP. Prior to that, what we're really trying to look for is something that has like a product, a solution that has the minimal amount of requirements that are prioritized the highest, and release that as early as possible in order to allow feedback to come through, which will inform our ability to iteratively improve that particular product, which comes in the post MVP stage, where we work very closely with a nominated app owner, which is effectively a product owner of the to-be process, who's responsible for receiving feedback and dictating to us the functionalities that are the highest priority.
Yep, and you mentioned this term sort of MVP, and it's come up pretty often when we talk about technology implementation. Can you dive a bit further into that? What exactly is MVP, and maybe what does it look like? And you talked about it being a minimum viable product. Is it really just minimal, or are you being, is it really more than something that's just minimal?
Right, absolutely. So it's minimal in like a very comparative sense, not in an absolute sense. Because if we look at the concept of minimum, we're really trying to target the functionalities that are top priority for that particular project, for that particular process to be improved with the highest impact. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that there's a very structured way of prioritizing the functionalities that we want to put inside of that product. The purpose of having something that's limited, as opposed to, let's say, having all of the requirements being put into and dumped in one go, is that we see that if we do that, it will take a longer time to actually deliver value to the business unit, instead of actually pushing out something that's comparatively minimum, and allowing feedback to come through in sort of with real uses, and iteratively improving that particular process.
And I think, as you mentioned, that's very encouraging, I think, for legal teams, because perhaps with technology, there's a assumption that everything sort of needs to be sorted. Hey, we need to be in a particular place. We need to have particular people. We need to have particular processes set up in order for us to even think about legal transformation and legal automation. That's just not the case, right? It sounds like even for you, you just start from a really small seeded, area, even just an idea, and then start to iterate, as you say, from that point onwards. So on that note of ideas, can you take us through sort of how the team that you're working with, the innovation team there at Telstra, how are you guys sourcing ideas? Where are these ideas coming from? Take us through that journey from idea through to implementation. What does that look like?
Absolutely. So there's really two ways that we get ideas. There's one that's more active for our team and a more of a passive, which is the latter category. I'll start with the active one. So very regularly, our team meets with senior stakeholders in our business unit to identify processes that are repetitive, identify processes that have pain points. And it doesn't have to be the entire process is painful. It's just we need to identify the specific things causing the most amount of pain. Once we identify that, we're able to use that to leverage into discussing the entire as-is process, and start working on that project, assuming it's been prioritized and we have the sufficient amount of capacity. The second bucket is more of a passive way, our team sits more passively in this second bucket. And we have a way which we've set up, like an interface to allow people in our business unit to be able to contact us whenever there is any processes or systems that they use that is painful. And it doesn't have to be, again, something super, super painful. Something small is a really good way we found to be able to elaborate into something that could deliver like a high amount of value. If I can give an example, a really good example of this is we had a process of having payment requests for public liability settlement payments, which was previously quite manual, and the business rules require multiple stages of workflow approval. And it all started because we thought that there was a way to put it all into one system, and that essentially drove us into exploring the whole as is process, process mapping it into seeing which stakeholders we have to engage with. And then we built a prototype, and then we delivered the MVP product within 2 months.
Wow.
So that's something that we're very proud of at Innovation.
That's awesome. And you had the idea that came through, and even thinking about that payments that you talked about, you had the idea that came through the either active or passive channels. But how did you go about, I presume there are a lot of processes within the enterprise that are painful, and people, I assume, are submitting ideas all the time. How do you know which ideas to prioritize? I feel like that's a common question with legal teams around, hey, there are all these problems that we have, the room's on fire. How do you know which room to address first? So how do you guys go about prioritizing and triaging your ideas?
Absolutely. So what we do is, from that interface where we're receiving information about a particular pain point, which sits in a particular process that's as is, we're able to use that to have an initial sense of the impact that this particular idea can have, the positive impacts that it potentially could have. It's after meeting with those key stakeholders or a key stakeholder that we're able to understand the as-is process, the pain and the intensity of that pain. And through experience, we're able to also figure out and guess reasonably well the amount of effort that's necessary in order to be able to resolve that. And so with that, we look at a framework which we typically use called the RICE framework, which we're looking at the reach, the impact, and the confidence that we have in the benefits that this 2B process can have per unit of effort. And then using that, we're able to provide an indicative prioritization score, which we're able to rank and decide on which projects to tackle first.
I really like that. So RICE being reach, impact, confidence that you can address it, and then divided by the effort required to solve that. That's awesome. And for listeners here, what we'll do is, after the webinar, we'll also link you to an article that Henry actually sent me. So I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm learning myself. So I'll send that through to you guys as well. It'd be a great starting point for many of you who are thinking about legal automation and where to even begin with all the ideas that you do have. So on that note of ideas and sort of triaging, prioritizing, I want to talk about engaging those SMEs, as you mentioned. So you've got the idea, you reach out. I think many people working in legal automation and just thinking about how to transform as-is processes, as you say, or documents, as we're talking about them, sort of struggle with engaging subject matter experts. Perhaps they're busy, perhaps they don't want to change their process, perhaps it could be a variety of reasons, but it feels like it's always so hard to kind of find the right person and engage them. And obviously now, we've talked about you've deployed, built and implemented over 15 legal automation tools in 12 months. Like, how do you do it? Like, what's the key to working with subject matter experts, and how do you move from idea through to implementation?
Absolutely. So at the ideation stage, it's really, really important that whoever has brought you that idea has painted for everybody, to the project team and that particular ideator, a complete picture of who is going to be involved, the stakeholder groups. And then the next process is, once you've identified those stakeholder groups, it's just about sort of reaching out and just be as empathetic as possible. Because when you're reaching out, you've got to really communicate to those stakeholder groups, especially ones that don't work very closely with you in innovation or in legal. And you have to communicate to them in a way that allows them to understand that you're there to help them make their ways of working better, to make their lives easier effectively at work. And with that empathy, you should also add on top of that the demonstration of commitment. With that empathy and commitment, you can really be able to communicate with a whole variety of cross-functional stakeholders and really deliver value, not only for your business unit, but for the business as a whole.
That's great. And I totally resonate with that, because I feel like one of the things of innovation is you're going into, someone else's BAU, someone else's line of work, and telling them, hey, we're going to change the way we do things. And I think the natural human response is to say, well, why are we doing that, right? So do you have any advice for teams who have gotten to that point where they've tried to engage SMEs, but perhaps are resistant to change? Perhaps they can't see the reasons why this change might be beneficial for them. Like, what would you say to teams who are facing that?
Well, it really depends on the particular group that you're targeting. But maybe if I could address something that was in your question, Min. I think to just add to my answer before as well, you shouldn't be approaching these stakeholder groups with this idea that we're here to change what you're doing. I think the vibe that you should be giving is, we're here to find out a little bit more about this process that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. And we want to know, the ins and outs of it, who are involved, and as detailed as possible. And our purpose is to help you. So you really focus on the as is and hone in on that. It makes the change management exercise really, really easy, because the pain points that you then identify from those key conversations then become like seeds to then grow functionality from and try and resolve. So I think that's definitely the approach that you should take. I've personally, of course, running through some of these cross-functional projects, I've had some experience working with the non-legal functions of the business, namely with the accounts payable team, who are of course responsible for all of the payments associated with a part of our 2B processes. And it's very important to make sure that you approach them with this energy of, look, we're here to help you. We're really trying to find out the process, and you guys are the subject matter experts at this, and empowering them to share their knowledge with you in order to help them. And it becomes this very like mutually wholesome situation where you're helping each other make each other's work life a lot better.
Yep. And a quick question I have on that is, you mentioned you're working with the accounts payable team. Because obviously you're supporting the broader legal team in this picture of automation. How does that connection work? Do you go through the the different legal practice groups, or do you work through the senior stakeholders, or do you work directly with the business? What does that kind of relationship look like in working with legal teams and working with SMEs within the business?
Absolutely. So I think about stakeholders as being like sort of concentric circles, because we have our primary stakeholders when we're running these projects and delivering the automation, which is in this particular case, the legal team. And we have, as part of that governance structure, we have someone that we nominate as, like, we call them the app owner, who is essentially a product owner for the 2B app that gets built. They have the final call and final say on the prioritization of any functionalities and requirements that goes into that 2B process. And so we need to work very closely with that particular product owner in order to better understand who exactly do we need to engage. We were able in this particular case, and in many other cases, to be able to leverage the relationship that this particular product owner already had with in this case, the accounts payable team. And in that sense, we don't lose focus of our primary stakeholder group, which is to make the delivery of critical legal services to the business more efficient and optimized. And the way that we're able to do that is be able to understand the part that is owned by accounts payable, and be able to sort of transform that for them as well. But yeah, I think the importance is that you should focus on the primary stakeholder group and identify that group.
That's awesome. And hey, look, on that note, I realize we've kind of gone down this rabbit hole of talking about subject matter experts and different project ideas. But to help the audience understand the type of automation use cases that you guys are tackling, can you maybe go through the different buckets and perhaps provide a couple of examples for our audience here today around where they might be able to find some really good ideas and some potentially subject matter experts to engage when it comes to automation use cases?
Absolutely, man. So the first category, which is the category that we see the most amount of automation being deployed at Telstra, would be anything that's a contract that needs to be automated. It's a contract automation. And the way that we sort of find these sort of ideas is we speak to mostly the supplier contract and the customer contracting team, which of course are two parts of the same coin, to let us know what type of contracts are repeatable, and what are some of the pain points that come out of that. And we're able to push out apps like the NDA tool, where we're completely automating end-to-end the generation as well as the sending for signature of non-disclosure agreements. We also have the Novation tool, which automates the same thing end-to-end of Novation agreements. So that's the first bucket. The second bucket would be advice generation. So we have an app where we saw a particular pain point in the legal regulatory team, where we had their core client base, which is in responding to law enforcement requests to Telstra. They're the front line, and they tend to request the same categories of questions about, how do I respond to this non-enforcement agency's request for information. And we were able to build a dynamic knowledge base for them, which helped them to be able to go there and self-help the ways to respond to these sort of repeated and low risk responses. The third category would be any sort of workflow automation. So we have an end-to-end process where we've automated the payment requests coming from an external vendor, external party rather, who requests payments from the public liability team. And because there's multiple stages of requirements, instead of the previous process, which was using Excel and emails flying back and forth where there's no data tracking, we're able to put everything inside one place, allow a dashboard to create transparency as part of that process, which was, again, another pain point was that opaqueness, and be able to deliver this product to the public liability team. And the last category is the category of legal intake and triage. So we have an app that allows, has questions that are typically asked that are conditional. So you ask certain questions in a certain order when the client requests a certain type of legal request, and based off the way they answer, we're able to triage their legal requests, or it might not even be a legal request. It might go to a non-legal function, and we're able to do that all automated inside of Checkbox. So that's our fourth category.
That's awesome, and I think that's super helpful for perhaps many of the audience members here today, thinking about where do I even begin with automation, right? Whether it's contract automation and starting there, or perhaps approval automation and going there, or maybe intake and triage, which seems to be a big theme in the automation space as well. And a side question here would be, what type of benefits have you seen from those four buckets of use cases? Is it simply time saved? Have you seen cost savings? Like, what does that look like in terms of overall benefit for the legal team?
So I think time saving and cost saving, they go together. The main metric that we use to measure the success, even from the very beginning of us as the innovation team triaging the potential projects, is about opportunity cost. Because there's sort of different buckets of work, types of work that are on a spectrum of automatability, we want to ensure that we allow the people in our business unit and lawyers specifically to be able to focus on the strategic high risk advice that they're providing to the business. And we want to be able to take away all the things that are repeatable, that are taking them away from being able to meet with the key business stakeholders because they're spending time doing something that's automatable, taking that away and be able to save that time for them. And we've in the past year been able to successfully do that and save over 6,000 hours of work for the business unit.
That's awesome. And can you maybe extrapolate on that? Because it sounds like you have a bit of a framework when it comes to approaching legal service automation at scale. You kind of referred to, enabling the lawyers to focus on high value work, and then kind of enabling them to lift the burden, or I should say, kind of give away the burden of repeated, kind of low value, repetitive work away. What's the framework that you guys are using when it comes to delivering legal services at scale within Telstra?
I think the key part of any framework, whenever you're trying to juggle different projects at once, which we certainly do on a week-to-week basis. The key driver of that would be communication. You need to make sure the communication happens on two levels. You would have to have communication externally to your business unit so that they know what work you're working on. It allows, especially we find with lawyers in our business unit, because there's sort of this idea of this concept of precedent in all of our brains as lawyers. We look at, we see that lawyers see what we're currently working on and suddenly get great ideas about how to make their own processes better. So that's the first channel. And the second channel, of course, is internal communication. So we have a Kanban board, which is very simple, set up so that we know what we're currently working on, what's on the backlog, what's been done, so that it helps us to be able to delegate work and combine that with weekly stand-ups. We're able to better prioritize and juggle the projects and be able to deliver the value at scale. So communication is definitely key.
Awesome. So it sounds like with all the different streams that you've got going on, when you're scaling this automation implementation, you've got the sort of internal inward-looking communication, you've got sort of that outward-looking communication outward-looking communication to the business, and then you've got sort of that inward-looking communication to the team that you guys have to organize that. Cool. That's really helpful. And look, I want to, in the interest of time, throw you a bit of a interesting question. I think there are a lot of people here who are sort of embarking on their legal automation journey, just starting out, not sure where to begin. What would your advice be for someone, or perhaps many people here in the audience today who are part of a team who are starting that journey, who are not the Telstras of the world, who want to get started and really find those efficiencies that you were talking about, but yeah, don't really know how to start. So what advice would you give?
Absolutely. So if you work in-house, you are in a awesome place to be able to find potential processes that can be improved. Because as an in-house lawyer, you communicate a lot with different parts of the business as part of your client base. So you actually understand quite well the as-is processes that are within your organization and specifically within your subject matter of expertise. So you want to start there and just have a think about the things that create pain for you. You don't even have to really measure it at this stage. Just identify them to start. And if you find one, and just the best way would be to visually draw it out, like just a quick flow chart to understand who are the groups of people that are involved, what sort of systems are you potentially currently using, and identify some of the things that are causing pain. Once you have those and you have pain points, you're able to then translate that into requirements for a to-be process, which then becomes the seeds onto which you grow potential automation solutions in the to-be process. So that's the sort of steps that we'd say. Start small, build your MVP, and then iteratively release as you get more and more feedback.
That's fantastic. I love how you focus on the requirement side of things. I think the temptation is for us to jump right into the tech and be like, oh, well, let's find the technology. But as you say, it really does need to start from, well, what do we need? What are the pain points? What are the requirements? And do we even have technology already that perhaps we're not aware of that can actually solve for that before we look at other technology solutions? That's fantastic. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to transition to the Q&A section of this webinar. There's a Q&A button at the bottom there. We have about 15 minutes of Q&A set aside for this special episode. But what I wanted to do before we do that is quickly share with you guys the next webinar that is coming up for those of you who do need to hop off at the half-an-hour mark. So as always, our contact details are there on your screen. You can email myself at minwoo@checkbox.ai, connect with Henry on LinkedIn, and we're free to answer your questions. But for those of you who are interested in this topic of automation and thinking about in-house teams, we have another webinar on the 24th of August between Evan Wong, our CEO, and Karen Sandler from G&T, partner there, and Knowledge and Innovation Officer. They're looking at real-world perspectives for in-house teams on driving efficiencies at scale. Karen is an expert in that space, so I'm personally super keen for that. Can't wait to attend that one. But yes, lock that in, earmark it. We'll send an email out for that. So for those of you who are interested, we hope to see you there. And with that said, we shall transition to some Q&A. Cool. So Henry, we've got a question here. And if I just open that up, give me a second. I just don't want to share my screen. because the PowerPoint is now acting up. Oh yeah, so the question that came up was around data. So measuring data after your sort of apps are deployed and how to articulate that benefit back to the business. Can you share a little bit about how you guys are going about managing that data? Because I can imagine you using, I don't know, like probably many systems. What does data mean to you? How do you organize it?
So for us, it's very, very important to make decisions and make recommendations that are data driven. So when we're able to collect data and be able to find the insights from it, it helps us to monitor existing apps that are already being deployed, allow for continuous improvement for the existing apps, but it also allows us to potentially identify new apps that might come from, let's say, within the triage tool, we might see a particular client or groups of clients clicking a particular set of options that we see, hey, look, we can potentially build an app out of this. So that's certainly the way that we focus on the data-driven approach. Now, how do we actually do it? So we're currently looking towards centralizing our reporting in Microsoft Power BI. Those organizations out there that use Tableau, also a fantastic tool to be able to create interactions with the visualizations that you can get from it. At the moment, they're still segmented. So one of the challenges for Telstra at the moment is being able to sort of collate all of them into one place and be able to automatically gather that data.
Awesome. So it sounds like you guys are embarking on that. Data is across multiple systems, but you're looking to consolidate that in one place.
Yes,
that's fantastic.
Absolutely.
And we have another question here around tips and tricks for, okay, so innovation teams, I think sometimes get a lot of flack, and I don't want to say ignorable, but you know, in the grand scheme of things, can kind of get pushed aside in terms of priority. What are the different ways that you kind of engage? Like, are there any sort of mediums or vehicles that you use to engage the business, to get their interest and to participate in innovation activities?
So that goes back to how we initially gather our ideas. So like I mentioned, we go out and we lead workshops or just sort of ideation sessions with the senior stakeholders within the business. And usually if they have maybe an issue with a previous project or anything like that, that actually we see as an opportunity for us to actually improve. Because like I mentioned, it's important, like we're tracking the data. We got the data and we can have data to sort of inform us how do we make things better. But sometimes data isn't perfect, doesn't capture things that are more nuanced. And so what's more nuanced than the actual true emotions of a SME or an end user? So we definitely welcome those sort of feedback, and we definitely put them onto a change request log or a product roadmap in order to make those existing apps a lot better. So the best way that we found to do that is to actually have face-to-face or Teams communications with those key stakeholders.
Cool, that's great. And just to take a step back to the data side of things, we've got a question here around a question around the dashboard, and in particular the dashboard for the triage tool. The particular audience member wants to understand what the visualization is for the dashboard in relation to the triage tool. What have you got there? What are you tracking? It'd be great to know.
Cool. This is going to go a little bit technical, but we primarily use a series of bar charts, which really help us to understand the proportion of people. So at the very beginning, there's a question asking the client, the end user, generally what area is this particular legal request about. They answer some questions. They eventually end up in a variety of different endpoints, which might be a request for the legal team that goes into the queue. It might be an automation tool. It might be a non-legal function that they have to engage. And we're able to see the proportions of the end nodes that occur for each of the start nodes. So we have 7 or 8 bar charts to help indicate to us the proportions there. That helps us better understand which practice groups have the opportunity to have more self-help, and certainly that's one of the drivers for us to identify new ideas.
Great. Now, hopefully that answers the question. Thank you for asking that around the dashboard side. Another question here, once you deploy an app, how much effort are you finding in maintaining the app and the user access for the app?
So this really depends on the particular app, and I think that the part that we need to not just gloss over is setting expectations at the very beginning of, like, right at the beginning, right before building and scoping the project. You need to make sure that you've set the expectation with the product owner or the app owner of the 2B process, what their responsibilities are post MVP. Their responsibilities are effectively to receive the feedback from SMEs and end users about the app that they own, and be able to prioritize that, with with us. So us in innovation, we're really kind of taking on a facilitative position with the experience that we've had running projects and knowing about process simplification, and then we're able to provide some insights. But the product owner, they're the ones that make the final call. Now, how much time do we spend on this? We usually spend about 45 minutes, maybe 30 to 45 minutes, every month for the first 3 months post-release, just to talk about the feedback and the change requests that have come through. And then after that, it's once every quarter to just make sure that the app is maintained in the sense that it's still relevant and the requirements are still current, to ensure that end users are still using it.
Great. Thanks for answering that, Henry, and hopefully that will answers your question, mysterious questioner. Thank you so much. And I've got an interesting question here. I'm actually really sort of proud. I'm reading the question. I'm proud of the answer. But the question says, how much of the automation work has been done by Telstra yourself, Henry, versus getting support from Checkbox as the vendor? And that would be me. How do you work together or not?
Okay, so in the past year, it's 100% Telstra. It's 100% Telstra, and but I wouldn't have been able to do it without the support of Min and from Checkbox. That's certainly the case. That's 100% the case. And Min would know. So Min and I, we meet on a weekly basis, and this was certainly necessary when I was starting. Having worked in legal before and not in system implementation, so I had to sort of learn quite quick, and Min was very, very helpful in that regard. But we also regularly, and Min will know this as well, that I regularly test the limitations of Checkbox, and I regularly say, can I do this? This is a requirement. And Min always delivers. Min always delivers. We implement it, and we, of course, Telstra internally, we do all the change management work, but the functionalities we wouldn't be able to do without Checkbox and Min in particular. So big shout out.
Melting my heart, man. You're making me
No
feel
worries.
good. All the viewers, I hope you guys don't feel cringy, but that was a bit of romantic interaction there. But yeah, no, and just to add on to that, look, Henry's been incredible, just maturing in his skill set. I don't know if you guys knew this, but Henry, studied law. He's a admitted lawyer. He made that transition, and that was just an interesting journey, because in the beginning it very much was focused on upskilling Henry to get to the point of, hey, this is what the platform does, and this is how you should approach automation and thinking about those principles. But I'm sitting here learning from Henry now. He's got the subject matter expertise. Took him no time at all to really be flexing and using our platform, but in particular for him to lead automation within Telstra in the broader sense, has been a great journey. And so it's been my pleasure, Henry. Again, romantic thing there, but it's been my pleasure to be part of your journey and Telstra's journey on the road of automation. Now, got another question here. One directed at you, Henry. What's the biggest feature that Checkbox has that no other platform has? Spicy, getting into the product.
Oh, it's good. That's good for me, because I actually do the majority of the builds in there. So the thing is, because I haven't actually built in other no-code platforms, I probably can't comment on specific functionalities, but I can comment on the comparison to low-code platforms like in the Microsoft suite with Power Apps, with Microsoft Flow. So these would be sort of comparatives. I would say Checkbox is superior in the sense that it's drag and drop. So you can have things that are very linear, helps with someone like me who's very visual, and it also helps with someone like me who would recommend actually to everyone to process map the as is process and process map from there the to be process. With that, it's really easy to be able to just build the equivalent visually even inside of Checkbox. So that's the first thing. I would say secondly, though, if you really want to go really deep into the functionalities of Checkbox, you can. So I know the solutions team at Checkbox works really, really hard to be able to provide functionalities like, so something that we recently implemented in some apps would be the ABN checkup. So you'd be able to, you have the end user, they type in an ABN, it links up via API with the ABR and be able to pull the name, as well as some other useful information from that register. Really, really awesome stuff. So that makes life for us really, really easy here at Telstra when it comes to automating and building.
Can you tell the audience that we're not paying you to say that? That wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely not.
We're not paying
Absolutely
you.
not.
That question wasn't set up. I swear it's a legitimate question. We're
It's
not
legit.
paying you. So I'm smiling here because I
100%.
feel very proud that you advocate for us. So thank you. It warms my heart. Awesome. Well, that looks like pretty much all the questions that we have. But as I mentioned earlier on, everybody, Henry and I are very happy to chat about all things automation. Once again, just showing you our contact details and also the upcoming webinar, which I'll be personally attending as an audience member. So I'm very excited about that. But yeah, please feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to chat. And we're very passionate about seeing automation blossom in the legal space. We think it's an emerging field. I'm very excited. Henry and I get to talk about it every single week and get hands deep into legal automation. So please do reach out. But other than that, all the best with your automation journey. I hope that you're able to bring efficiencies and benefit not only to your legal team, but also to your business. So the biggest blessings to that journey that you guys are embarking on. And we hope to see you at the very next webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.